All right, welcome back to Chapter 3, Part 3. We're going to carry on with putting on our controls for our text box onto this application. So to do that, let's go back in and bring up the toolbox, which is under the View tab, and down to Toolbox, and make sure it's pinned there so we have a copy of it. So this application pretty much has all the tools and controls on it. So I took a couple off just to demonstrate this because we've looked at how to put controls on in the previous example. So we double click and we can drop a default one right here. When I do that, one of the first things I would recommend is, of course, renaming it. So this by default comes up as a text box, but it's more specifically a first name text box. That's a very descriptive name. Enter that in. Another way I could do this is just take it and drop it and drag it where I want it. And again, I'm going to go in here and I'm going to name it. So it's text box last name. And there we go. Now because this application was previously done for you, I want to make sure that the name of the objects are properly set up. So this one here is a label control. So I want to make sure it's a label. It's called full name because I'm going to take my first name and last name and put it in here so it's the full name. And this button right here should be called the button full name. So it's the name, the type of the control first, and then I'm going to put the name of the object there second. As you go through these controls, you'll see here that there's a mixture of names in here, and I've done that on purpose to sort of mess things up to get you guys to practice naming all these objects. So this one right here again is a text box. That should be called text box day of weekday. Really, that's what that one should be called. For example, I'm going to go back in here. This would be called text box and then called weekday. Would make more sense. So you'd have to go through all of these controls and make sure that they're all named. The labels of these text boxes probably don't need to be named because those right there are not going to be used in coding. So therefore, we don't really need to name those objects. All right, so we've got a couple of names in here. That's set up. We've checked that. This is our label. This is our output control. So that's set up, looks right. And this is our display name, which is, I called it here full name, but I could actually call that display name. Display name, just so that it's all, everything looks and very clear. It's very organized. Now, if I want to code that, simply just double click it, and it opens up. When I click the button display name, it will let me type in the code. So I like to look at my design and my code at the same time. So what I'm going to do is take my code window here and I'm going to drag that tab and I'm going to move it down and hold my button. And that allows me to organize my screen a little more. So I'm going to get rid of my toolbox, don't need that anymore. And I'm going to organize this. And I'm going to get ready to start coding this stuff in. So basically all I want to do for this, the logic of the code behind here is to take really what is, I want an answer here. When I click this button, I want to take my first name and last name from here and I want to make it equal to here. So I want this to equal my first name plus my last name. So let's type in pretty much exactly what we just said there. So I'm going to say let's take the label, and that's the label, and for the first, what do we call that? That was the label for the full name, and if a dot, the text property, because that's what's going to go inside of here. The label, the text property, is equal to the text box for the first name dot text, and the concatenation symbol is just to add them together. So I'm going to basically just add the text box for the first name to the last name. Put in a semicolon. Now that's just going to join those two together. So when I compile this, when I compile this and run this, it's going to just take my first name and last name and put them together. And it looks like there's another error in here. So what I'll do is in the next videos, I'll go in here and I'll explain. We should go back and check the syntax because it looked like it took Ryan, but then the system Windows form didn't work for some reason. So this is giving us an opportunity to look at the code right here and try to figure out what went wrong. And it doesn't look wrong, but something obviously went wrong. So we'll have a look at that to try to figure out, and that happens all the time when we're coding. So we're dealing with either a syntax error or logic error of some sort that's coming up with this problem. It's probably some kind of logic error in the system. All right, so we'll deal with that one in the next video.